Few things can sink a movie scene quicker than a botched performance from an actor. I mean, after all, there's a good chance that the one thing you remember from The Dark Knight Rises is Marion Cotillard's pitiful display as her character took her final breaths. And all of the following cases follow the same logic. Great scenes that are almost completely derailed by a usually amazing actor who just isn't quite on the ball. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 terrible performances that almost ruined recent movie scenes. Number 8. Annabelle Wallis, Malignant. A couple weeks after seeing it, I'm still not entirely sure which parts of Malignant were supposed to be hammy and kinda bad on purpose, and which parts were the result of regular old bad filmmaking. You see, that's partly because James Wan's latest is a big daft B-movie full of crazy bloody set pieces and a whole bunch of references to similarly outlandish giallo movies from decades past. Lead Annabelle Wallis, for the most part as well, does an admirable job attempting to thread the needle of this precarious tone, and manages to nail most of the emotional beats. Where she falls down though is the climactic sequences where, vague spoilers incoming so you're being warned, she vanquishes the evil that's been causing so much trouble for the rest of the film. This confrontation is supposed to be epic, but Wallis kind of just seems a little bit annoyed rather than seething, and it undermines some of the horror the ending otherwise could have had. With the entire cast going from over the top to flat in a second though, it is unclear who's at fault for these strange acting choices across the board. Was it the director, the actors, the script, or all three? Number 7. Henry Thomas, Dr. Sleep. It's always difficult when an actor steps into the shoes of a character so inextricably linked with another performer. While it stacks the deck against them, it doesn't mean that winning audiences over isn't possible. But sadly, Henry Thomas couldn't quite overcome the odds when he was cast to replace the iconic Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance in the shining sequel Dr. Sleep. Featuring reshot scenes from the first movie and all new ones starring the characters, the entire Torrance family was recast. But it's Thomas who gets the most to do and sadly is the most unconvincing. The actor is clearly game enough, but with a sequence where Jack, or as he is now, just the Overlook's ghostly bartender, speaks to his son Danny, is derailed by a performance that isn't quite an impression, but isn't quite something new either. Though it would have been dangerous going for a full-on Nicholson impersonation as much as it would have been to completely reinvent the character, this middle ground where half of Jack's mannerisms are there but half aren't ultimately proves to be the most distracting, and it results in you analysing the actor's decisions rather than feeling immersed in the scene and believing in the character. Number 6. Peter Dinklage, Avengers Infinity War. For a time, Peter Dinklage was one of the hottest actors on the planet. His career-defining role as Tyrion in Game of Thrones made him a household name and also racked him up plenty of Emmys across the show's 8 seasons. Sadly though, like so many actors to flex on the small screen, his big screen roles haven't been quite as well received. While few are outright bad, his appearance in Avengers Infinity War was a huge disappointment. Playing Eitri, the powerful being who forged both the Infinity Gauntlet and Thor's new weapon Stormbreaker, he's only in the movie for a few scenes and sadly doesn't make the best impression. Now granted, it's not like it's the best material in the MCU that he has to work with, as Thor's trip for his new weapon was viewed as a bit of a lull in the otherwise pristine narrative, but he still comes across as a little bit miscast. The deep, bellowing voice feels forced and kind of out of place, and even the comedic beats come across as wooden and flat. Dinklage is so much better than he is here, and stands out more thanks to the rest of the movie being so good, and the other actors fully embodying their roles. Number 5. Ashley Zukerman, Fear Street 1666. It feels a little harsh to crap on the actors in the Fear Street trilogy. Because the movies often feature the same actors playing different versions of the same character, it can mean they absolutely nail one performance but then fall short on another. Sadly, Ashley Zukerman, who initially plays Town Sheriff Nick Good and then Ancestor Solomon Good in the 1666 witch trial section, isn't totally convincing as each character. He is much better as Solomon though, this character being the one seemingly kind-hearted man in a village full of superstitious fanatics who actually turns out to be the big bad and the architect of all the pain in the town that everyone's been going through. His heel turn here is fine enough and he brings a lot of presence to this role. But after this, Zukerman can't quite pivot into evil as well when we jump back to the present day and pick up with Nick. Considering he's supposed to be the ultimate villain of the franchise, it makes the climax feel a little inert, and it's a shame after showing so much promise as the deadly Solomon. Number 4. Riz Ahmed, Venom. In a way that's rather quite apt, Venom is definitely a movie of two halves. On the one hand, you have the goofy as all hell horror comedy that star Tom Hardy is in, where his character Eddie Brock and brain-eating symbiote anti-hero Venom get themselves into capital S shenanigans. On the other hand though, you have a drab, lifeless, by-the-numbers superhero tale about evil corporations and science experiments gone wrong. Unfortunately, the usually stunning Riz Ahmed is absolutely in the latter movie, and gives the kind of wooden, unconvincing performance that is totally at odds with the energy that Hardy brings to scenes. Now, as mentioned, Ahmed is one of the finest actors working today, so the blame can't be entirely placed on him, but every scene where he's the focal point threatens to derail the whole thing. Particularly bad is Dr. Dora's death scene, where Ahmed is lacking all the menace and intimidating presence that the scene requires. He's fine enough as the smarmy businessman type, but he doesn't quite give this villain enough bite. Number 3, John Magaro, The Many Saints of Newark. The Many Saints of Newark is far from the perfect Sopranos film, but it still has a whole lot to love, not least the stacked cast playing familiar favourites and brand new additions to the New Jersey crime family. Most of the actors embodying the old cast do a great job as well, especially Vera Farmiga as the spiteful Livia Soprano and Corey Stoll as Uncle Junior. However, there is one dud in the cast, and that's John Magaro as Silvio Dante. Unfortunately, Magaro spends most of the movie doing an incredibly over-the-top impression of original actor Steven Van Zandt. Now, admittedly, this wasn't an easy act to follow, as Van Zandt's own performance borders on parody at times, but still, Magaro ends up almost feeling like an SNL sketch version of Silvio, and it hurts the movie in one of its most pivotal scenes. At the very end of the flick, Silvio is having a heart-to-heart with Dickie Moltisanti in what's supposed to be a pretty emotional sequence. However, the actor's impression here is so distracting that the emotional beat doesn't hit with the weight it should. Number 2, Gal Gadot and Pedro Pascal, Wonder Woman 84. Gal Gadot isn't a terrible actress, but I think it's fair to say that sometimes she doesn't quite nail a take and the filmmakers just decide to use it anyway. See the awful delivery of Kal-El No in Justice League for good proof of that. One scene towards the end of Wonder Woman 84 similarly almost hits with a thud thanks to a stilted delivery by Gadot, and also the hammy overacting of co-star Pedro Pascal. It comes in the climax as Gadot's superhero battles Pascal's Max Lord and urges them to renounce magical wishes that they'd made earlier in the film. It's set up as the big hero moment, the moment where Wonder Woman comes out on top, and the swelling score and cross-cutting around the world certainly does wonders, oi oi, to sell the gravity of the moment. But Gadot's mostly flat delivery doesn't imbue the words with the power that they should have. Contrast this with old Pedro, who is going full ham, shouting things like, "You can't stop me, no one can," in the most over-enunciated way, and it throws the tone off completely. Number 1, Bruce Willis, Glass. The thing about M. Night Shyamalan's Glass is that movie fans had waited literal decades to see it. Since Unbreakable introduced the world to Bruce Willis's David Dunn, a new modern superhero, fans had been pining to see him back in action. So when Split came out in 2016 and ended with the reveal that it was set in the world of Unbreakable the whole time and was setting up a third movie that would bring Dunn back as a main character, fans were ecstatic. The issue was, actor Bruce Willis clearly he was not. Willis is pretty poor for all of this movie, rarely bringing any of the gravitas or presence necessary to a character who is literally a superhero. Now, admittedly, David Dunn was never the loudest or brashest character, but that only makes this performance worse, because in theory, it's a hard one to mess up. Instead, it always feels like you're watching Bruce Willis get a paycheck rather than the character he's supposed to be playing. He's worst in scenes where he's actually forced to interact with James McAvoy and Samuel L. Jackson, who are clearly having a lot of fun with the material, but Brucey just feels like he's being held there at gunpoint. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think about these actors in these scenes, and are there any similar examples that you would have included on here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.